compassion leading to freedom. Hello everyone, and welcome again to this month's virtue practice. And this word practice is interesting when it comes to the effort that was required to bring these virtues into a deed, into something that we can bring as a daily practice into life. In some ways, it is easier to use the virtue practice as a contemplation that we can think about and contemplate these virtues rather than actually bring in a practice where we will something into our daily life. It's much harder to bring into a practice, and those that have been working with, for instance, the 6 subsidiary exercises know that the will exercise, the daily practice exercise, is much harder to engage with. But this is something that is useful for us to continue to bring effort to, even though we may forget, and even though it is difficult. However, it's useful to get a sense of the difference between the thought and wisdom of a virtue and the practice of a virtue. And particularly to recognize that the thought and wisdom of the virtue is useful in one way to precede the practice, because then we have clarified what indeed we need to bring into the world. For instance, with compassion, many people today are thinking for the atrocities that are going on in the world, the difficulties, and they may believe in a certain way that this is compassion that draws them to contemplate the suffering and struggles of others, when it's not compassion, but it is fear, or it is anger, or it is another impulse. So clarifying the quality of a virtue can be very significant in supporting our ability to clarify the deed. Now, the complicated part of that is that really the deed arises because we have a stronger feeling for compassion. And this year we're not working on the feeling, because those of you that work with the 6 subsidiary exercises recognize we work with the thought first and the stream of thinking, and then the deed, the will, and the stream of willing before the feeling really arises. And yet in our own inner life, the thought provokes a feeling that actually then allows for a deed. So we will have to move through the feeling process. We will have to find the quality of compassion before we can enact something. So what is that quality that is different from the wisdom of compassion? So when we think about compassion and when we contemplate compassion, the thought life gives us certain insights. It gives us illumination. It lights up for us understanding. But when we feel compassion, when we feel the power of it, the power of this facet of love is different than the wisdom of this facet of love. And in order for us to really find the deed needs to somehow be imbued with the power of compassion and not just the wisdom of compassion. So this is really something, and what makes this practice of the deeds of the virtues actually harder for us to engage with. And yet hygienically it's very useful to do a practice of the deeds of the virtues before we come to the final practice of the feeling, the power of the virtues in their fullness. So we contemplate our compassion. You may want to go back to last year's thoughts about compassion. And then we will find what is the deed. What is something that I can do each day that actually is imbued with compassion. But it goes through, even in our contemplation, igniting something to do with this power. Now this is something that is such a mystery, how the wisdom of compassion and the power of compassion are different things or different forces, that when we can really contemplate this and experience this, we begin to understand some of these deep mysteries that have been offered to us through Rudolf Steiner's work. That in one way, the human being has come to know the light of the sun, the wisdom of the world. It's there because it illuminates things, and our consciousness can understand the world. But now we are also asked to have an experience of what are those powers that really live behind something, because as wisdom has detached itself from fundamental powers, we can know something without it actually changing us. We can know something as information without us having to live it differently. We can have insight without us having to be anew. And yet it is in the power of these virtues that we are really transformed. So it's the power of love that contains this transformative force, and not necessarily any longer the wisdom of love. The wisdom of the sun helps us to understand the whole world and what is possible. This force of the sun, understood in the realm of wisdom, does not, however, reveal to us these deeper realities of the power of the sun, unless we keep just breaking down that wisdom into finer and finer sort of scientific building blocks. But it still doesn't tell us something really profound about the power of the sun that affects the world in very different ways than just the understanding of the sun. Now, Leo is governed by the sun, and the sun is this extraordinary force that if we really were to grasp the light and the warmth and the forces of what the sun does for the human being, does for the whole universe, we would be able to discern the difference between the wisdom and the power of love. What is this power that becomes a deed? And so we enter into this practice of the deeds of compassion, knowing that actually the illumination, the wisdom of compassion, is a transformative force. And only that transformative force expressed in the deed is really a will that is not of our own personal will. It's a will that unites us with the divine, a will that unites us with the thy will. So all of the practices of the virtues are not personal will placed into our life, but actually thy will, a divine will that can be enacted in and through us. And where do we really grasp this living relationship is through our understanding of the hierarchies. And as we turn towards Michaelmas and preparing for Michaelmas, we can start to ask these questions. How do the hierarchies, the angelic realms, reveal to us the living will of the word, the living will of the thy will? So our participation in the virtues, in the willing of the virtues, is really a participation of transforming my will so that my will is also thy will. And yet this process is a lifelong journey, and we need the wisdom so that we can really begin to understand the thy will, so we might also be willing to sacrifice my will. So you may find that through your contemplation of the compassion, the wisdom of compassion, that you can begin to recognize that it isn't just a thought, but there's a power, a potency, that when it is brought into a deed, transforms the world, not because I place my will into the world, but that because through my will, thy will may be revealed. That thy will can be revealed through the practice of the virtues. And so we remember when we have performed our deeds of love, we also want to recall that at some point in the day and feel that energy from the top of the head pouring down the front of the face and down the chest and into the heart. And those of you that choose to can follow the verse and the eurythmy. You may find it useful to join myself and colleagues in various events that will help us to understand this more deeply. There's the upcoming Preparing for Michaelmas course. There's the 6 subsidiary exercises, and there is an event, a workshop called Disrupting Materialism, all of which will be linked here. Have a wonderful month.
Invigorate with senses' might, matured existence of all worlds, perceptive elements of beings, towards the firm resolve to be. In the surging shrine of life, in the prevailing pains of growth, with senses' might, arise and allow any streaming activity that you can locate from engaging with these words to stream down from above the head through the crown and face and neck, down into the heart.
Leo. Hello, everyone. This month brings us to the zodiac constellation of Leo, and our will practice with the eurythmy gesture of Leo that will also help us to find this virtue for the month, which is compassion leading to freedom. So for those of you who have not been to this site before, could you please go back to the beginning of Astral Art 2024, and there you will find another recording of an introduction to eurythmy, if you don't already know about eurythmy, and also the ERO, which is a beginning gesture that we will also use in this practice each month when we add the Leo constellation to it. Now, eurythmy is a sacred art form, and from moving these gestures consciously within ourselves, we also connect to the cosmos. And this bridge that we then make to the cosmos allows the cosmos to stream in health-giving forces. Now, before we're born, when we're in utero, these forces from the cosmos are working to build the human body. And the constellation of Leo is bringing the form of the heart, or the pattern of the heart. And that's what we're going to work on this month. And we can also understand where compassion also comes from the heart. Now, I'm dressed in blue today, and blue is the colour for Leo, and it's the colour when we look out to the blue sky with absolute enthusiasm. So this wonderful blue dome above our heads that fills us with enthusiasm. So we can't always find it in winter, but we may have a memory picture of what that blue sky looks like. So when we start to form the gesture of Leo, we want to do this with enthusiasm. And that's the way we find our way into this gesture. So if I just did it like this, it wouldn't have the enthusiasm. And I can't teach you enthusiasm. You need to find that in your own being. So we're going to have a little practice of the gesture first. And what I suggest is that you just stand still somewhere in your space for a moment and really focus on your heart. And then finding this moment, bring your fingertips towards your heart, and now unfolding the arms like rays of sunlight, reaching out into the cosmos, into the blue dome above your head, and then release again. Let's do that again. So the fingertips towards our heart. And feel this ray like sun from our heart out into the world. And once more, here in our heart, enthusiasm out into the blue dome of the sky above our head. So it is good to practice this without looking at the screen. So you might like to now turn your screen away a little bit and have a little practice of this gesture, because the more we practice it, the more it will live in our etheric, and you'll find your way there to this gesture more easily. So if we just do it once, it's not going to have the same effect. But if we could do it 3 times at least, that would be wonderful. So I'd also just like to say that last month we worked with cancer, and as you may remember, cancer brought in this rib cage, which is this lovely protection for the heart. And so now the heart can feel this protection, which was selflessness, the virtue cancer. And now the heart can feel this protective covering that can ray out the sunlight into the world, the heart light into the world. So the sun and the heart have a great connection, because the sun is the center of the universe and the heart is our center. So let's just practice this again, and maybe not look at your screen this time. See if you can find your way in. Maybe you can listen to me. So find for a moment before you move the heart, your heart. And there you might like to think for a moment, this blue dome of the sky that is above us. And now, with your fingers pointing towards your heart, we start with this gesture, opening out with enthusiasm into the world, and then release. And you may feel some movement around you. Just let that settle. Find again your heart and your fingertips towards your heart. And very consciously, with your enthusiasm and your gesture, stream into the dome, the blue sky. One more time. Your heart. Bring your fingertips to that starting point. All your consciousness and your fiery enthusiasm out into the blue sky. And then release. And pause for a moment while this activity from our movement settles around you. So like each month, I'm going to step to the back of the room a little bit, and we will do the move the E-R-O 3 times. And I would also like to now start moving the zodiac gesture 3 times as well. Just have a little pause in between each one. And I understand some of you may still need to watch the screen, but once you've got the movement, can you please not have the screen or the computer operating? Just try and live into this activity that we're doing in a space that doesn't have this electronics involved in it. Because it gives your inner life this moment to be able to find what's going on in there and how you can strive to find also the compassion which comes from our heart. So let's try this together. Just in silence, 3 times E-R-O, 3 times the Leo gesture. And then I'll speak you through the streaming which pours into the top of our head down to our heart region. Streaming from the cosmos down through the top of your head, past the forehead, down towards the larynx, the throat area, moving on down further to this mystery center of the heart. And there we meet with compassion.